What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so we all know that, man, what? The last 8 years, maybe? The last 8 years, somehow magically, there's only two players that are in the GOAT conversation, and that's Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Somehow all the other people have been totally just erased from the discussion. And then they love to give all these reasons why you can't include this guy, that guy. As I said before, this whole GOAT debate originated on social media. There's some people try to dispute me on that, but they haven't been on social media as long as I have, as far as in the community. The original debate was between between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Then the lamestream media took that debate and just made it their own, but then omitted Kobe, and then the La Mafia put LeBron in there, and then they eliminated everybody else. Nobody else is part of it. Kareem's not part of it anymore. And then, to me, the biggest crime is Wilt Chamberlain has somehow been omitted from this debate. A few years ago, in an interview, Dominique Wilkins talked about how it's ridiculous that Wilt Chamberlain is no longer included in this debate. During a 2018 interview with Hoops Hype, NBA Hall of Famer Dominique Wilkins was asked to name players from his era who don't get the respect that they deserve. The Human Highlight film then named players like David Thompson, George Gervin, and Artis Gilmore. According to Wilkins, these players changed the way the game was played, yet they are often not talked about in basketball conversations. So we talk about them over here, but the Nimrods don't, because they don't know these people. But Wilkins mentioned Wilt Chamberlain more than those three. Dominique Wilkins says that Wilt doesn't get the respect he deserves and is also ridiculously omitted from the GOAT conversation. Dominique, or Neek, as he's affectionately called, said, quote, "He averaged 50 points and 30 rebounds. But do you ever hear him mention the greatest of all time discussion among the top 3 or 4 guys? It's crazy." He went on to say about the man who scored 100 points in a single game, grabbed 55 rebounds in a single game, reportedly blocked 28 shots in one game against the Pistons, if I'm not mistaken. He said about him, quote, "You have to understand something. His era was even more physical than our era." As a point I've made time and time again. When Wilt played, there was a such thing as mauling. It was ridiculous when Shaq said recently that Wilt was never double teamed. Are you crazy? Do you know how many times the game's greatest defender was guarding him, and Bill Russell, then Havlicek or Sam Jones would come over and they'll try to trap him? He's been harassed by 3 guys, and he saw in the 90s how oftentimes there was single coverage down low. He was, Shaq is just going up against Robinson. Shaq just going up against Olajuwon. And he was saying, man, if that's all I had to deal with was just Bill Russell, man, do you know how efficient I would have been? How more dominant I would have been? But anyway, Wilkins says you have to understand something. His era was even more physical than our era. And with the pressures in life that he had to deal with, quote unquote racism, and go through, it was not easy for him. He talked about a time when there was a lot of racial tension and those sorts of things. He had to worry about competing and worry about social issues. Don't they really understand or realize that? I mean, look at how many 60-point games this guy had throughout the course of his career, which I believe was 32. He had more 32. He had more 60-point games, 32, than anybody did in the history of the NBA, with the exception of Michael Jordan, that had 50-point games. He had more 60-point games or more, 32, than anybody else in the history of the NBA did have 50 points or more, with the exception of Michael Jordan, who had 39 games of 50 points or more, including the playoffs. So he had more 60-point games, 32, than Kobe had 50-point games or more. Harden, Rick Barry, LeBron James, Elgin Baylor, all of them. And to average 50 points, that's just incredible. You know, and yeah, it's not just about the numbers. People say, well, all you guys do is care about the numbers. It's not just the numbers. It's not just the numbers. Fans flock to see this guy in an era where there was limited reach. You know what I'm saying? Like limited reach as far as in marketing avenues for these players. Like people talk about George Mikan and how much he was the man. But Wilt Chamberlain was the man, even though he was often billed as the bad guy. He put asses in the seat. You know what I'm saying? They actually played a game in Hershey, Pennsylvania, because Wilt Chamberlain was the attraction. He didn't disappoint either. I think he had 100 points in that game, if I'm not mistaken, right? Check out the attendance for the Lakers in the late 60s and early 70s when Wilt Chamberlain was there, and look at the attendance after he last played this game. Look at the dip. No matter how people want to slice it, he was a superstar. What I suspect is what's going on with Wilt too is it's not only just ageism, but I also think a part of the reason why Wilt Chamberlain is not revered today is a lot of people don't like his politics. Wilt Chamberlain was conservative, and he usually voted Republican. Now, in defense of Wilt Chamberlain, people have to remember that he was born in the 1930s in Philadelphia. Well, Pennsylvania, I think Philadelphia. I know Pennsylvania. So a lot of black people at that time, especially in Pennsylvania, were voting Republicans still. Remember, the state of Pennsylvania went for Herbert Hoover in 1932. Herbert Hoover, who was extremely unpopular and trying to run for re-election, lost in a landslide to Franklin Roosevelt. The main reason why he was able to hold on to the vote in Pennsylvania, a lot of it had to do with the black vote. Black people were still voting Republican. So a lot of that is ancestral. A lot of that was traditional. But that gets forgotten in time because a lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about when they talk politics. Because culturally, up until this recent generation, black people have always been conservative. But we didn't fuck with Republicans after the 60s, you know what I'm saying? Until, you have this recent generation that is losing some of this traditional monolithic voting when it comes to the Democratic Party. But anyway, make a long story short, I do think some of that plays in why some people look at Wilt Chamberlain we're a very politicized society, man. People have agendas. But yeah, it's not just the records, but the records do reflect his dominance. And for much of his prime, unlike a Bill Russell, he wasn't playing with the best teams in the NBA. And, I often have to make the point where, man, if we had free agency back then, like we do now, and Wilt was just able to join a better team in the offseason when he became a free agent, well, I think he would have more championships. You know what I'm saying? If that was the case, then Wilt could have joined Elgin and West when they were in their primes. If he had the option to do that, but he didn't. Just imagine if we didn't have free agency and LeBron was stuck with the Cavaliers all this time. Would he have 4 titles? I doubt it. So, we got to be a little careful with all of this stuff, man. But anyway, I do believe he belongs in that conversation. That's just my opinion. But I think that's most people's opinion who really know the game. He at least belongs in the conversation. Yeah, it hurts that he only had 2 championships and that he was 2-4 in the finals. But doesn't seem to hurt LeBron that he's 4-6. There's all these excuses. People don't want to hear Wilt had to play against a super team and the Celtics. They don't want to hear that excuse, but we got to accept all these excuses for LeBron, though, even with the benefit of free agency. See what I'm saying? Wilt was pretty much stuck on the teams he was stuck on. Bill Russell was granted a team that was the best team in the NBA by far. And like I said, if you're going to penalize Wilt, why don't we penalize Bill Russell? Why don't we penalize Elgin Baylor? Why don't we penalize Oscar Robertson for only having 1 title or none? Why would we just do it with Wilt?